All right. Oh, shit.
That's close up.
Fact check this podcast episode. I don't remember. This is why I stopped saying the episode number after 100 because it was just getting too hard to keep up with.
Just call it 3003.
Is 6 million too high? For my show.
Most
For my
definitely
show, yes.
is.
I think it's 171, if I was guessing.
171 Jews in the Holocaust? Oh, episode. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. I think there were a lot more than that. Maybe.
It's in between 171 and 6 million.
Yes. Probably not as close to 6 million. But.
Well, we've already got this taken down.
Yeah, we're off to a roll.
A real right-wing start here.
Yeah. Today we are going to be talking about right-wing extremism. Mark joined me previously to talk about right-wing violence, and what we figured out was while there's a lot of talk about right-wing violence, most of the actual violence tends to come from the left. So they're talking about right-wing. We're going to talk about right-wing extremism, and a lot of these articles will reference domestic terrorism and the far right being this like white supremacist movement that's loaded up with all of these, domestic terrorists. Of course, the fun thing that they never actually mention is the fact that all of these supposed white supremacist, extreme right domestic terrorist groups will actually kill fewer people over the next 2 years than what got shot in Chicago over the weekend. But why would we actually why would we actually look at any statistics or actual factual information where these things are concerned when talking about right-wing extremism? Which one of these forms of extremism should we dig into first today?
Oh, so should we go into reading first?
Oh, yes.
Which is, I think that was the longest article, and I had to skim lots of it because
it was
getting a little pedantic.
It was a little tedious. I mean, it's from the Atlantic, so what'd you expect? But
this is true.
White supremacy's gateway to the American mind. So apparently, reading is highly white supremacist. It's a form of far right extremism. What they get around to in this article in particular is they talk about a lot of these supposedly far right Telegram groups and stuff like that. They like to push people to write and talk about neo-Nazism and white supremacy and all kinds of other stuff. And so it's leading to a lot of stuff getting written about white supremacy and what was it? What was the one right at the beginning? They talked about the Jews, which was
there's a heavy focus on Amazon's self-publishing platform, which I guess Amazon refers to it as what do they call it? A printing press and not necessarily a self-publishing platform, which kind of makes sense. But I think that the focus on Amazon is that they probably rightfully think that they can bully Amazon into not allowing these folks on their platform anymore.
Well, I mean, that's the end goal of all things leftism, is to not let anybody who has a dissenting opinion voice that opinion anywhere ever.
Yeah, and all of these right-wing books, as you said, they focused only on Holocaust and race differences books, which, I mean, there are a lot of right-wing authors who are writing not just about this kind of stuff, but obviously it helps their narrative to highlight these.
Well, and this article in particular focuses a lot on the self-publishing that's been going on Amazon, like you were talking about. I wish I should have pulled it up too. There was another one that goes into like specific books that are as far as what these journalists think these specific books are kind of shaping and grooming a generation of far right white supremacist extremists, and it's a lot of stuff that you and I have read. Like it's a lot of books that are historically accurate. Like they are things that talk about the Weimar Republic, or things that talk about what led up to World War One, what led up to World War Two. Like it's things that take a very maybe not the corporate narrative driven view of history so much as it's a objective look at what happened to get from point A to point B. What happened to get from the different compromises of like the early 1820 and everything up to the Civil War. Like how do we take those steps from the compromise of 1820, the compromise of 1830, and then full on Civil War in the 1860s? How did we get from everything that happened leading up to World War II into leading up to World War One into World War II? Like these are actually historically accurate books, but because they don't paint the corporately approved narrative of history, they're promoting right-wing extremism.
Yeah, they do. They mention Evola. I don't know if they bring up revolt against the modern world specifically, but they kind of reference Julius Evola as an author that these right-wing people are reading a lot of lately and ordering off of Amazon, which apparently I found out you order an Evola book off of Amazon, you might get put on a list. Sorry, Mom, for making you order me that book for Christmas last year.
What if you order all of Kaczynski's books at the same time?
I would assume that gets you on some sort of list too. But the ironic thing about Evola is he's actually throughout history been read by both the left and the right, because back when the left was more of the hippy dippy left and not so on board with the Industrial Revolution, like this is when they were reading Evola, because Evola is also not on board with that. But now that right wingers have started reading them, it's a no book.
Well, isn't that something that's sort of funny with the books part of this, is that a lot of these books they get brought up in these articles as being like extreme right and pushing for white supremacy and stuff like that. That they are similar to Evola. They're things that traditionally and historically they've been more leftist books, but as the left has progressed and moved into this current stage of psychosis that they live in, now those things are unacceptable because they don't support giving all of your dedication and support to some behemoth government. Like, what happened to the left that used to be like anti-establishment?
I think it's just this awkward relationship with being the quote resistance while also maintaining, like, holding every single institution and essentially being the regime. It's hard to be the regime and be a lover of Evola or of some of these other books. So it's easier just to use buzzwords like resistance or we're still being oppressed and all of these things, as opposed to actually delving into the ideas of resistance in more in-depth manner by reading these texts.
Well, and we kind of touched on it on the morning show, is that when you're looking at especially with some of the corporate narrative or the mainstream narrative that comes out around like vaccines and stuff like that. Like the people who within just 3 or 4 years ago were questioning big pharma, questioning the science, questioning all of these things, they have now completely flipped on their head, and they are like just gobbling the whole cock and balls of all things big pharma. While if you dare to question anything, you are a right-wing extremist. Like, why does that make you a right-wing extremist if you want to actually look at the information and the data that's coming out from the CDC and from Pfizer themselves and say, hey, maybe this isn't all that good? You're now a right-wing extremist. And something that's interesting that I have kind of seen happening through all of this is you do have some people that, while they definitely wouldn't be otherwise considered a right-wing extremist because they are constantly getting labeled as such, they're starting to say, you know what, fuck you then. If no matter what I do, I'm going to be some right-wing extremist, then I'll go be a right-wing extremist. Like I will be a Republican now, and I will just take that approach, because you're not allowed to have any sort of a nuanced opinion on things. You're not allowed to read or research or think for yourself. You have to either completely bow to whatever the narrative is, or you're a right-winger. So there are people who are just saying, all right, fuck you then. I'll go be a right-winger. If that's the way this is going to be, bye. And that is kind of white pilling. Like I like that. I like that approach. I'm starting to take some of that approach on Twitter with some things I've been railing on for the past week or so.
Yeah, I'm all here. I'm here for it. It is interesting that the article did talk a lot about fiction books by these authors, because one might think that, I guess it's more like mainstream conservatives who read like 99% nonfiction, right? And they don't even touch fiction. And the first time I ever appeared on your show, we're like, read more fiction. But there is our platforms, or there are writers who do write fiction in the right-wing sphere. And I think one of the reasons that they use, or definitely one of the reasons they use like a self-publishing platform such as Amazon, is because most fiction books that are thrown in our face are obviously going to be on the New York Times list, and there's not going to be any sort of right-wing or differing narrative than what we're like, what's forced on us through TV screens and those sorts of books. So of course, people who aren't a part of the regime are going to have to use avenues like self-publishing. There has been a rise in like independent publishers who publish like right-wing stuff, which I'm surprised I haven't seen a whole lot of hit pieces yet. But you have the people at Antelope Hill, who I think were doxxed just this past weekend. The Imperium Press as well, Mystery Grove. Like, these are all rising, probably because not a lot of us, although we're kind of forced to use Amazon as a publishing platform or as a printing press, it would be better to have like our own independent publishers, and you're seeing that happen. So the problem for the left, it might work itself out as far as Amazon not publishing these forbidden texts, but you're going to be finding them published by more sources instead, which will of course receive more hit pieces as they gain more notoriety.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the social media thing playing itself out in books, as you have all these different social media platforms that are kind of springing up because of the extreme censorship of the prominent ones. And every time one of these new social media platforms springs up, there's a million hit pieces that come out about how it's just nothing but white supremacy, extreme, alt-right extremism, and all of this other stuff. Like, get new talking points. You're getting boring with this shit. Like, it's not even, it's gotten past the point of being humorous, and now it's just retarded.
It's interesting how these independent publishing houses are actually a lot more successful are being a lot more successful than your or alternative like social media platforms.
I think there is actually a desire to read. I think, especially maybe for the people who fall into that right wing extremist group, they're getting fed up with the bullshit of social media. They're getting fed up with all of this, corporate narrative stuff, and they're looking for things to read, and they're looking for things to learn. They're looking for things to occupy their time with other than that. So I think that's why you're starting to see success on those things, is because there is starting to be like a divorce from the traditional media stuff and moving towards, like, it talks about it in a couple of these articles, like Telegram groups and Signal groups and stuff like that. Like, people are moving away from these social media platforms and moving to more direct messaging, more directly connected groups, and also looking for things to read, looking for things to share, looking for things that they can put together with those groups, those like-minded groups, and not have to deal with all the bullshit of if you post something that's even moderately right-wing on Twitter, all it takes is the wrong person to retweet it, and then you've got a whole mob of woke psychopaths, breathing down your neck. Which, cool. I love arguing with those people, and eventually they all block me, and so that's I have fun with it. But for most people, like, that shit can be demoralizing, and eventually you just don't want to hear it anymore. So seeing those independent publishers be successful is kind of I think that's like a really good thing, whereas you're not seeing the independent or the alternative medias be as successful. That's because people are just getting fed up with it. Social media is a terrible thing anyway, and the fact that people are getting fed up with it and starting to disconnect from it, I think, is a brilliant and wonderful thing, honestly.
Yeah, as I'm speaking of fed up, like at the end of this article, this Atlantic article, I think it was like written during the pandemic, and one of the reasons she gives for people delving into these forbidding books is because people, quote, got bored with Netflix. It's like, well, I think that's halfway true. I think they did get bored with Netflix, but they also probably got fed up with what Netflix was feeding them, because it's all just completely been converged with wokeness, and like you don't see any sort of pushback against the popular narrative that the culture puts out there on these shows. And people, like even normies at some point, are able to kind of see through that, and it gives them a thirst for more.
Well, to that point, like, there have been some kind of, I don't know if you want to call it big, like, developments or changes or whatever with Netflix and some of these others. Like Netflix basically told everybody a couple weeks ago that we're going to put out stuff like the Ricky Gervais comedy special. We're going to put out stuff like Dave Chappelle's comedy specials. We're going to put out stuff that you might not like. And if you don't like it, then you can get the fuck out, because it's not our job to cater to whatever makes you comfortable. It's our job to put out good content, and good content does not exclusively mean whatever you think is good. It means whatever people want to watch and see. So there is something of a, and we'll see how it plays out going forward with Netflix, and if they become a little less psychotically woke with some of their content in the future. But people are getting fed up with some of that stuff, and they're starting to come around to acknowledging that, and not just running with being quite as progressive and catering to the mob as what they have been previously. So maybe, and there are also things with Disney that things are getting shaken up with Disney and some of the people who are in charge of content that they put out. Like, so it's possible that there is kind of a burnout that is happening with a lot of these big, media companies and some of the woke shit. And like the end of this article said, like people were getting bored with Netflix, and so they were looking for other forms of media to keep themselves occupied with. Like people are getting bored and fed up with that stuff because it's just giving you one thing all the time, and roughly half of the population doesn't want that one thing any of the time. So
it was incredibly boring.
Right? Like, has that not struck you? I mean, it strikes me as like every time I turn on a new show and you've got some trans person or a gay couple or like some of this dumb bullshit, like as soon as I see it, it's not even a distaste for it as much as just it's like this
I can't
shit
make
again.
it through 5 minutes.
It's like really? Like could we be a little bit more original? Like really? Like it's just gotten boring. Like it's not even that I'm burnt out on the gay, trans, pushing all this agenda bullshit. It's that it's not even amusing anymore. Like, okay, so I've been watching The Wire. Dag had recommended it, and I've really enjoyed it. But it takes place in the early 2000s when gay marriage hadn't been passed or whatever, and it was still kind of a taboo thing. And there are gay characters in The Wire, and the way that they're presented and the way that the stories are done, it's engaging and it's interesting, and but like anymore, the way they do it is just boring and fucking terrible. Like at least make it fun and entertaining. Instead, they just make it this cookie cutter thing that gets slapped in there because it has to be a part of it, because that's how modern society is. It's like, just can we fucking not?
There's a physiognomy argument to be made here too. I was at a place over the weekend. It was like a family farm fest thing that me and my brother brought my dad to for Father's Day. And I mean, everyone looked generally the same, except for two people stood out. And they were probably the most unattractive people there. And no one wants to turn on their TV screen and see unattractive people. And the kind of folks that are being pushed forward, and it's not just rainbow folks, but it's also, we're trying to fight fat phobia. Like these people are being pushed as main characters and heroes, and it just doesn't work.
Well, since Trey brings it up, the gamer stuff, apparently video games is also a form of right-wing extremism. Is far-right extremism infecting the gaming world? I don't know how much gaming you're into, but the N-word is referred to as the gamer word. Because apparently there are a lot of 12-year-olds on playing video games online that just drop N-bombs regularly. So
there's hope for society yet. I was never much of a gamer. My brothers played Call of Duty. Like it's kind of like World War II, World War I narratives, is it not?
Which Call of Duty are you talking about?
I don't know which one they played.
Because there's
authority on this.
There's a bunch of different Call of Duties. So yeah, some of them are like the older ones were based around the early World Wars, and then some of the newer ones are based around like modern times, and then there are also others that are like futuristic type stuff. So there's a lot of different directions that Call of Duty can go depending on which one. Yeah. As Trey says, Call of Duty has a different theme each year. Okay. So,
but I guess their argument isn't necessarily what's in the game; it's more of the chat while the game is going on.
Right. It's the people who are playing and the chat that's going on and the conversations that are being had during the games are becoming right-wing extremism, and you got all of these gamers who are talking about let's see, the games are becoming increasingly social, and those social hooks provide the structures and infrastructure for extremists to organize, mobilize, and spread their hateful and extreme ideologies. So people who are playing games are now talking about extremist, hateful, right-wing stuff.
So at risk of sounding like King Trump, but this is less about like right-wing rhetoric and more about, I guess, masculine energy, right? Locker room talk.
Yes, I mean that's the crazy thing about this is like so people shit talk on video games. A black guy got banned from multiple games for streaming when he told a woman to get the fuck back in the kitchen. Like that is,
you play basketball with a bunch of black folks, you're gonna hear some things,
right? Like that's gamer culture. Like it is a nonstop stream of shit talk, and like it's Twitter on steroids, and it's like it's in real time. It's everybody talking to each other. Yeah, like locker room talk is inherently right wing. Like the way people behave in these game chats and in locker rooms and stuff like that, like it's not socially acceptable. It's not, what was it when Trump was running for president or whatever? Was that the grab him by the pussy thing?
Grab him by the pussy is locker room talk.
Yeah, and then you had all these like NBA players that came out and said that's not locker room talk. We don't talk like that. And then you at the same time had all of the clips of them like in the locker room saying not only exactly that, but like infinitely worse. It's like, oh yeah, that's not locker room talk. Here's a clip of you saying something that's like 10 times worse than that. But no, that's not locker room talk. Like anybody who's spent any time in a locker room knows that like that's what locker room talk is. Like
yeah, I went to a private Christian school, and I am glad that none of my parents heard the things talked about in our locker room even. So
I mean that's the way the locker room is. But so like for what this article was talking about with the gamer culture, let's see. The Anti-Defamation League found that 53% of online multiplayer game players who experienced harassment believed they were targeted because of their race, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, or sexual orientation. Yes, I'm surprised it was only 53%, because if you're playing a game and I find out that you're a woman or that you're black or that you're 12 years old or whatever, I'm going to talk shit. I like you want it to be shit talk needs to be both humorous and specific. Like you want to lock in on whatever their insecurities are and just go after them. And if that many people feel like they're getting bullied playing video games online, maybe go do something else and quit being such a pussy.
Maybe it's not for you.
Yeah, like this might not be for you. If you have a problem with getting bullied in online chat rooms and stuff, maybe this isn't the right place for you.
And like any form of bullying in schools now is essentially banned. So this is like part of growing up is not necessarily being a bully, but having a lot of shit talking energy or wanting to release some of that adrenaline, or you're going through puberty and you need to release it somehow, like you can't do it at school, then the private chat in the gaming room is the place to do it, I guess.
Well, like the anti-bully culture that they've created in schools and stuff, I don't understand that. Like it seems like that's creating this like unhealthy bubble that kids are living in, that they never experience anything that like pushes them. I remember getting punched in the back of the head as a kid and called a nerd. and I turned out fine for it. And actually, the guy who did it, like, we're good friends. It's not like it was something that, you know, as kids you go through phases, and everybody's an asshole at some point or another. You know, we're all assholes in our own different ways. And, you know, some are physically violent, others are verbally abusive, others are emotionally abusive. And the ones of us who are good at it learn how to incorporate all three. It, like, this anti-bullying thing, now it's because they're not being able to express this stuff in a controlled environment at a school, because you would have fights that would break out at school. You would have people would bully and say mean shit, and like it happened, and the teachers would usually rein it in and kind of keep it under control, and, you know, no harm, no foul kind of thing. But now it doesn't happen in a controlled setting. So it's happening in online chat rooms. It's happening on, you know, social media, private chats. It's happening in video gaming, on, like, you know, the locker room talk type stuff. And it's not happening in a healthy manner. So it's getting even worse, and it's getting out of hand because they've put such an emphasis on anti-bullying that it's turned the bullying into its own, like, monster that is getting out of control.
Yeah, it's definitely not healthy, because, like, you think of the difference between males and females, like, it's still like a feminization of men, that their trash talk, or even like the physical release, isn't actually physical. Like, you think about girls talking bad behind each other's back, like that's the way they do it, whereas men are more confrontational. But it's almost like they've feminized the masculine urge to shit talk, because it's all being done on screens, or not necessarily face to face anymore.
Well, it's like, maybe being in a private Christian school, you didn't see it, but like going to public school, you would have friends who would literally get in a fist fight in the parking lot, and then once it was done, everybody hugged and laughed and
you gotta go get a milkshake.
Yeah, like, you talk shit, knock the fuck out of each other for a couple minutes, and then everybody hugs and dusts each other off and moves on with life. Like, that's the end of it. You didn't have these kids getting constantly harassed to the point that, you know, they want to shoot up a school or something. Like, if you had a problem with somebody, you went and beat the hell out of each other, and then your problems were solved. And like that, even that's been stigmatized. Like, now you see kids that get in a fight, and then they get mad about having gotten the hell beat out of them, and want to bring a knife or a gun to school or something like that. It's like, what happened to create such a pussy society that you feel like that's, like, if I get my ass kicked, okay, I got my ass kicked. You know, we shake hands and move on with life. That's part of it. And now it's, the whole thing has just been stigmatized into this. Anything that's would be a healthy outlet is now considered extreme in some manner or another.
Yeah. And this is how you get people like Fauci and Bill Gates running things for a few years. People who clearly were taking it out on folks for being bullied and shoved in locker rooms during their high school years.
So I take the approach of I shit talk and bully my children regularly, because I don't trust the schools to provide them enough of that on their own. So it's like, I'm trying to. And my son got really butthurt because the girls were being mean to him. It's like, dude, you're just as mean to them. Like, if you're gonna get butthurt about it, then you're not allowed to say anything to them. Like, if they can't come back at you, then you don't get to go with them. So either decide, are you going to be a pussy about this, or are you going to participate in the give and take that is bullying each other around the house like we do? And and he stopped being a pussy about it. So obviously it worked out. I'm I am kind of mean to my kids, deliberately so. Like I'm not mean to them in an extremely mean way, but I'm mean enough that they know that I'm joking and that it's all in fun. I'm probably one of those.
You strike a good balance there.
Yeah. I try to make sure that the kids have a healthy mix of abuse and love in their life.
It's good.
Speaking of abuse and whatever, the next topic on right-wing extremism is what is it? Fascist fitness? Is that what they called it?
Yeah.
Pandemic fitness trends have gone extreme, literally. So yeah, if you do, if you're working out at home, that is a gateway to right-wing extremism.
Of course it is. This was written during the pandemic as well, right?
Yeah. Everything came out of the pandemic. All things right-wing extremism started to materialize because of the pandemic.
So, maybe. I mean, yeah, this is if we can't be violent verbally within our video game chats, then one way to release that is to actually physically exercise, but I guess we're not allowed to do that either.
Oh, here. This is like the best line of this whole article. Physical fitness has always been central to the far right. In Mein Kampf, Hitler fixated on boxing and jiu-jitsu, believing they could help him create an army of millions whose aggressive spirit and impeccably trained bodies, combined with fanatical love of the fatherland, would do more for the German nation than any mediocre tactical weapons training. Of course, they bring it back around to Hitler. If you're into boxing and jiu-jitsu and physical fitness, then you're literally Hitler.
One of my, someone ever to ask me like my least right-wing stance, it's probably the fact, I don't know if you've run into this, it's the fact that I am more of a cardio person than like a weight training person. And there are a lot of right-wingers out there who are like, cardio, you're basically a leftist if you're more into cardio than weight training. But we're allowed one deviation, right?
I mean, that's for me. I'm more into cardio as well. I would rather run than spend a lot of time lifting. I think it's more practical. Like as far as lifting and like bodybuilding type stuff, I can get everything that I need just with what I'm going to do around the yard with picking up limbs and moving the tiller and stuff like that. Like I don't need to be jacked and big, massive muscles, especially if all of this right-wing extremism does come to fruition, then being in good shape cardio-wise is going to be a lot more important than having massive muscles piled on top of muscles. Like that's just impractical. I've got a little curl bar over here with a couple 10-pound weights on it, and like that's the extent of my weight training. Is I work out with that, and I don't need to have big muscles.
I think the weight training thing came from kind of like the rise of BAP, right? Where having a beautiful body is kind of virtuous in and of itself for both males and females, but it's different with both men with like who are jacked, obviously kind of like stand out in society as opposed to those who aren't. And
I'm leaning into the dad bod.
There you go. Some women find that more attractive. So, not that you're trying to find a woman.
I'd say that I've got a good woman, and she likes my dad bod. So,
I like. I'm a fan of like longer. Like I've been doing longer runs on Sundays now. Like 6 miles yesterday. But there is something about playing the long game and doing like longer runs that makes sense to me, because you can actually I was never like good at pacing myself because I played basketball in high school, and that's like sprint, and feeling like that differentiation between like doing a long run and playing action sports kind of gives you a balance of doing things in the moment and also like kind of being patient for, I guess, waiting for like those desired results. What is it? Delayed for gratification. It kind of gives you a better feeling for how to work through that.
So here's the U.S. is so it talks about these like far right groups in Germany and Poland and the United Kingdom that are starting like MMA clubs and stuff like that. And it says the U.S. is comparatively far behind, which will only become more and more problematic. Oh, so like in Germany and Poland and the United Kingdom, they're offering like intervention and prevention programs to keep these like far right groups from promoting violence. And the U.S. is comparatively far behind, which will only become more and more problematic, especially since the phenomenon is growing in the country, building on the established fight club culture of MMA far-right extremists. So apparently there's all these like MMA clubs and like fight club type things that are starting up that are all like pushing white supremacy and mixed martial arts. Like, I don't know how you make I don't know how you come up with this shit. And they're all very the examples are really specific, and most of these groups, like even the ones that they talk about that are like engaged in extremist violence and stuff like that, haven't actually done anything. Like they've openly talked about it on like forums and stuff, and then never do anything. Like this is the right wing extremism and the right wing violence is they talk about stuff on chat rooms and then never do anything. I think it's
and there's just something to be said about physical. I don't know. Like I think that all kids should like engage in some sort of sport, like physical sport, and preferably that puts you as part of a team and not just like an individualized sport, because it builds discipline. And that's probably, I mean, I think it has been called a right-wing term now is discipline, but this is something, if you're not building like discipline in some area of your life, then you actually are more likely to lash out violently because you don't have that foundation that you built for yourself and for the people that you're like working with.
Well, and that's kind of the root of all of these articles that we've been kind of looking at and talking about is like all of these things are some form of discipline. There's some form of self-betterment. Like they're all the things that the left is actively against. Like,
it's because they hate themselves.
Right. The left is all about the body positivity. Don't do anything to change who you are. Don't do anything to make yourself better. Just be a fat fucking slob and be horrible. Don't do anything to learn. Don't do anything that challenges your intelligence. Don't do anything that would challenge the narrative. Don't read things that are, unapproved or that don't directly toe the line of whatever is being sold. Like, so don't read anything that might cause you to think. Don't try to exercise, work out, better yourself in any way. Definitely don't participate in bullying or shit talk or anything like that. Doing, things that are actually healthy for you and to blow off steam and to not become just a bottled up. Actually, they don't want you to not bottle it all up, or they don't want you to bottle it all up. They want you to take all the right drugs so that you don't even feel any of those things at all. Just be a fucking zombie. And then like this, are conservative Christians religious extremists? I like how this article like kicks it right off with talking about the similarities between conservative Christians and the Taliban.
Of course. Piggyback off what you ended with there, I think one of the reasons that the left hates this sort of rise and right-wing, quote, physical exercise and reading and all this stuff is it's more beneficial to them for us to rail against the ugliness of the left, as opposed to creating and building something that combats that ugliness, as far as it just being beautiful and like better looking. This guy Lomez on Twitter had a great thread about how to like attract, because to some extent you have to attract sort of like the middle or like normies to your ideas. And one of the best ways to do that is attract attractive women. And how do you do that is you're just more attractive than the other side, physically and otherwise.
Well, and one of the things that you've seen coming from a lot of the more progressive left-wing push with stuff is so like the Victoria's Secret catalogs, the Sports Illustrated thing, like they're pushing this body positivity, but the people that they're showing are also just not attractive. Like they're just not.
Yeah.
Straight up. They are kind of ugly. I mean, what was the Lena Dunham? And I know we accidentally or offhandedly mentioned her on the morning show this morning, but like there was a thing that shows her in
We're talking about a tranny and we immediately went to Lena Dunham.
Well, have you seen her? I mean, there was I can't remember who it was from, but it was on Twitter that they had this picture of her in a bathing suit, and it was fucking horrific. Like there is no universe where that's in any way attractive, like period. And they referred to her as stunning. It's like, yeah, stunningly makes me want to lose my lunch. I was definitely stunned when I saw it. It was, like shock and awe. Like, oh fuck, why would you do that? But that's what they try to promote and sell as stunning, as attractive. And then when you look at like people who take their own personal health seriously and start working out and getting themselves in shape, like what's the chick from Pitch Perfect, Rebel Wilson? Have you seen pictures of her since she got herself in shape? Like she's not a massive fat slob anymore, and she's actually really attractive. Like it's kind of weird how that works out, that if you just take some personal responsibility for yourself and work on you and getting yourself in shape and taking care of your body, you just kind of end up looking better. It's crazy how that shit works out.
And when you look better, people will gravitate to you, and not just and the ideas that you possess. Like it's not that hard to understand.
Well, like I think on the physical fitness and that kind of stuff, I think the reason that has gotten labeled with the right wing extremism thing is because a lot of the places that were fighting the hardest against the lockdowns and mandates and stuff like that were gyms. They were places where people actually go to be physically fit. They're places where people aren't getting sick. Like you're going there to get better. They're trying to shut down the things that do the most towards not getting sick. And so a lot of these gyms and stuff are just like, no, fuck you. Like we're here to promote good health and being in shape and being physically fit. And the people who come here and work out aren't the people who are getting sick. They're not people who are at risk for this. And so because that was a bucking of the corporate narrative that if you left your house, you were going to catch COVID and die immediately, that had to be right-wing extremism, because obviously nobody on the left was pushing back against the COVID narrative. So
we can talk about the Christian extremists now.
Yeah. That's
in relation to comparing them to the Taliban. I was actually having this conversation with my mom yesterday, and I began this part of the conversation with Christians should actually start to act more like Muslims. And she just like made this face. And I was like, no, hear me out here. It's like, the fact that Muslims like get so offended when like Muhammad is denigrated, I actually think that Christians should act more like that when when pop culture makes fun of Jesus, or there's like just this mockery of Jesus. Like I think that taking your religion more seriously is actually a way to combat this whole like spiritual but not religious phenomenon that goes on, which is basically an excuse for quote unquote tolerance, which in and of itself is like antichrist.
Yes. Well, I mean that's the big complaint that I have with modern Christianity is that it is so squishy and it doesn't take itself seriously. Modern Christianity has effectively thrown out everything that made it as a religion meaningful and purposeful, in that it's just now it ebbs and flows with whatever is societally acceptable, and that was not the founding of Christianity. That's not the founding of religion, period. It's not. If the thing that you're worshiping is going to just change as public sentiment changes, then you're just worshiping the mob. You're not worshiping anything that has any substance or value. And that's my big problem with modern Christianity. But like what this talks about in this article is like the conservative Christian, which takes a more like a more puritanical view of Christianity and a more traditionalist view of Christianity, and actually promotes real Christian values. Like that's right-wing extremism, because you're not willing to just ebb and flow with whatever society says is good and acceptable. You actually have morals and principles and values. You have things that you believe in and things that you stand for, and things that you stand on, and things that you're willing to fight for and not tolerate. And anything that is considered intolerance, well, that's right-wing extremism, just by their definition.
Yeah, I think one of the things they're worried about is there seems to be like an upcoming rejection of like this modernized Christianity. Like younger people more and more seem to not be down with the Christian rock concert style like services that like these mega churches put on, and they're looking for a more ritualized and disciplined form of Christianity, because it kind of creates, like, if you're someone who exercises all the time, going back to that article, like you are engaging in a ritual. If you make your religious practice more ritualized, then it actually is better practice out in the real world, because you're putting that discipline into practice, and you're living it out, and not necessarily living a spiritual life, as they call it, and anything kind of goes Americanized Christianity of today. Like that seems to be increasingly rejected, and I'm sure that's worrisome to the left.
Yeah, I mean, like you had said, anything that involves discipline of any form, that's worrisome to the left, because if you have discipline, then you probably have some sort of belief system. You probably have some sort of ideals and morals, something that guides you. And as soon as you have any of those things, then you're not going to be as malleable and pliable to just go with whatever they say. I mean, like we were talking about, like 3 years ago, the anti-vax people were leftists who were hated Big Pharma. And now those same people are the ones who bow at the altar of Fauci and Pfizer. Like, how do you get to that point unless you just have absolutely no discipline? You have no values. You have no principles. You just do whatever you're told. And so if you're not going to be willing to do whatever you're told, then you're a right-wing extremist.
Yeah. Trey is speaking my truth here in the comment section. I went through a phase where I absolutely despise the Puritans, and I'm I'm not actually. I guess I got a little bit of Puritan stock in me, but I respect the way that they were able to actually gatekeep their communities. I mean, they kicked the Quakers out. I have more Quaker stock in me than Puritans, but I appreciate that Puritans were like, look, we can't coexist together, so you're going to have to go to the Delaware Valley and do your whole like worshiping style there. And even like the Quakers, they're probably the most sort of like live and let live society of like early colonial America. However, like their live and let live had nothing to do with vice. Like if they construed how you were living as virtuous Christian living, then they're gonna let you go about your business. But if you're into vice, like, yeah, you're not welcome here either.
That's like all these modern American Christians that say, well, that's not my Jesus.
Yeah,
anytime
right.
you talk about like Jesus calling sin and saying that he gave steps for how you go about addressing sin as a church and as a community and all of that stuff, and like nowhere does it say that Jesus said, yeah, just do whatever makes you happy and whatever. It was like, no, he very specifically said, like, you call it out. You don't, even the love the sinner, hate the sin thing. Like, he didn't say, what he healed somebody and then he said, go forth and sin no more. Like, he didn't say, all right,
Yeah,
you're good now. Go, you can go back and do the same shit that you were doing before. It's like,
you've now got a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, it was, now you change. Now you stop doing that. It wasn't, okay, you were doing this before, I fixed it for you, so you're free to go back and continue doing all the things that got you in this position to begin with. Like, no, he actively told people, stop doing that, change your ways. Like, that Jesus was not all about tolerance. He was about fix it.
Right. I agree with Trey in the comments too. The Quakers did not hate natural order or hierarchy. So
we're back to that natural order.
You're a fascist if you believe in that.
Yeah. You're a fascist if you believe in anything other than completely caving to whatever the current narrative is. And I guess that's why you and I are such extremists.
It's because we exercise.
Yeah, we exercise and we read. We are, and I talk shit on online playing video games from time to time.
What do you play?
And we're Christians.
We have the trifecta. The Trinity.
Mostly anymore, I play Destiny. I don't. It's been a while since I've played a whole lot of Call of Duty or anything else online. I've kind of narrowed it down to Destiny's about it. My son will play Call of Duty from time to time, and I will hear all kinds of crazy shit talk coming out of the screen. And I'm like, what was that? He's like, oh, nothing. It was just this person over here. I was like, why aren't you talking shit back? Like, what is wrong with you?
You're like, you got to get in on that.
It's like, look at that guy's name. That's the gayest shit I've ever heard. Why aren't you laying in on him about this? Like, if I hear it coming out of the computer, I should hear, or out of the screen, I should hear it coming out of your mouth too. Like, you should be going back at these people as voraciously as they're coming at you. I don't understand what's going on here. I ain't trying to raise no pussy. Get in there.
See, I was always like pretty reserved and reserved as a kid, still am. But like whenever playing sports, like the intensity meter like went up, I would cause my lifelong best friend to quit in the middle of games. We'd be on the same team. He would quit and go home like he was a neighbor friend. He was literally like, I'm taking my ball and going home because Mark keeps verbally abusing me during this game because I'm not doing anything right. And then, like you said earlier, like I'd go over there and be like, look, man, I just want to win. Like, no hard feelings.
If you quit sucking so bad, this wouldn't be a problem.
I won't get on you if you actually like score when I mean, you're like 5'3" and you think you can back down my brother who's almost 6 foot tall. Like, it's not gonna work.
Isn't that the way it goes though? Like, you will talk more shit to the people that you're like friends with and like the most.
It was good for our friendship. I mean, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but I could call him up and we'd go hang out. Everything be just like we were when we were kids.
I like Magoo's idea. Fact check this gamer group. We can have a gamer group that just plays shit together. And
I've said this on the morning show. I only played NCAA and NBA and some Madden growing up. So you guys don't want me playing Call of Duty or any of these other first-person shooter games.
Look, it'd be like our fantasy football thing. Like, we need somebody that's gonna be terrible at it. That way, it makes it more entertaining for the rest of us.
True. Pull up this last comment of his and somehow scratch out everything except for "I'm a fag."
Yeah, Magoo is definitely a fag, but he's our fag. Speaking of Magoo, I haven't gotten confirmation yet, but I believe he and I are going to be on Leighton's show, Outlawed Thoughts, tomorrow evening to debate the Florida Libertarians on whether or not it's a good idea to run somebody for governor against DeSantis.
No. Actually, you know what? I was looking at this guy, and I hope they do run him and they plaster his face everywhere, because I think it'll just repulse some more folks. And see, that's my argument. That's why I can't do this with you.
I know. We can go into that in greater detail.
I'll let you and Magoo handle that.
Yeah, that'll be me and Magoo's thing. Yeah, Carlos always shows up just in time for the fag talk. Like, it's never fails.
Get Carlos out of here.
Oh, well, hopefully, if you don't already consider yourself a right-wing extremist, you'll start trying to exercise, read some books, get in touch with God, and talk shit on the internet, and find yourself moving more in that direction, or at the very least, having some level of discipline and finding some principles and ideals that you cling to. In a world of totally flaccid, whatever you want to call what progressivism is creating in this country and in this world in general, having something that you can actually stand on is going to be more and more important every single day. And so yeah, join a right-wing MMA group and learn how to get in shape and expand your mind a little bit. Mark, you got any plugs?
Yeah, if I could distill this. Oh, yeah, I'll give the plugs after I distill this into a couple sentences. Reject the schlobby-looking neckbeards who say they're going to take down the state, and just start physically exercising and reading stuff other than Rothbard, and you should be good. Also, read markmetz.substack.com and watch the morning after show.
There it is. All right. Hope everybody has a good rest of your day. I will be back on Wednesday with. Actually, I gotta look at that. I'll probably be back on Wednesday to do a recap of the debate on Tuesday if everything works out right. And if we don't end up having the debate, then I'll just come back on Wednesday and give my whole spiel on why I think running a libertarian against DeSantis is a terrible idea. Might even have Magoo come on with me, and we can just do that together. We can do our whole thing without having done the debate.
There you go. I'll come on for that one and say why running a libertarian period is a bad idea, and then we'll have our own debate.
Sounds like a plan. All right. Hope everybody has a good one. Later.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.